Okay, hi. Today I want to talk about why alcohol is normalized in our society. Not only normalized, it is acceptable, accessible, and celebrated. Although many Canadians struggle with their addiction to the substance, they can purchase it at their local grocery store, family restaurant, or even at a movie theater. Many holidays and occasions are accompanied by this substance, but not with others. Wouldn't it be strange that at Christmas dinner, Grandma rolled the family joint? At your little brother's wedding, a toast with a line of cocaine. Retirement party celebrated by popping a tab of acid. Why is alcohol more socially acceptable than other drugs? Well, first I want to start off with the history. So it all started with fallen fruit. Ethanol is the compound found in fermented fruit. It occurs naturally, so it's tricky to date back. The earliest form of archaeological evidence was a clay pot with fermented rice, honey, and fruit residue found in China. This dates back to 7000 BC. The Chinese are believed to be the first known people to produce alcohol on a larger scale. Found around 5000 BC was grape wine in the Mediterranean, Greece, and Egypt. This is where grapes grow easily, and this would explain why many references were made in the Bible. Back then, alcohol was held in high regard, used in religious purposes. Brewed for nutritional value, sailors and soldiers and workers were given alcohol because of the nutritional benefit, and it would not spoil. Alcohol trade became of importance. When Europeans arrived, they traded alcohol for local resources and eventually for enslaved people. Spirits became a way of currency. After the Europeans colonized the Americas, they used slave labor in the sugarcane fields, creating rum. Rum was a way of payment and to keep hydrated. Water sanitation was not a thing back then, so it's likely it was more polluted than beer. It was also used recreationally during festivals and feasts. In the 19th century, more factories were being built, a need for more people, urbanization, long workdays, cities, middle class, more money, more problems. So they found an escape in alcohol. This is when limits to alcohol started. So, for instance, age limit. Oh, my camera's shaking. Sorry. Age limit and not drinking and driving. So on to other drugs. So in the 16th century, where altered mental states were seen as witchcraft, and the witches were killed, this probably deterred people from using things that altered one's psychological state. Fast forward to the Civil War, that many got hooked on morphine. People became addicted to the substance. Were viewed as detrimental to society, and so was the abuse of the drug. People who used these substances were locked away. The punishment of these users led the public to believe that these drugs are always bad and must be destroyed. So, marijuana. So marijuana was used for medicinal purposes. It was used for the hemp fiber in clothing and rope. But because of the Mexican Revolution in 1910, there was a surge of immigrants who flooded the labor markets. They brought with them the introduction to smoking marijuana. So this was associated with cheaper Mexican labor and created a racist, negative view on cannabis. So cocaine and opioids were thought to be medical miracle drugs when they were first introduced to Canada. Cocaine was a medical numbing agent, But similar to marijuana, there was a racist view associated with the drug. In the early 20th century, white employers encouraged the use by black laborers. Eventually, propaganda was made, and it said that cocaine was making black men violent and that the white population would be targeted. This created fear. So eventually, people began abusing drugs recreationally, and the mainstream looked down upon this. So regulations were passed that limited the availability of these drugs, so that they could only be prescribed by doctors. These drugs were all slowly regulated in the early 20th century, mostly because of ethnocentric views and racism. Drug use was demonized because it was blamed on minorities when the drug war happened. The majority, Caucasian people, felt the need to protect themselves from these substances and minorities. Alcohol, on the other hand, has been a staple in the Western European culture for thousands of years. Due to its historical prevalence in European culture, it was what the majority knew and loved. Where cocaine, heroin, marijuana were new and somewhat removed from white culture in the early 20th century and foreign to them. So now that we have a little scoop on the history, let's talk about the effects of alcohol. So the short-term effects range from decrease in anxiety, improvement in mood and possible euphoria, increased self-confidence, decreased muscle coordination, and impaired judgment. The long-term effects, these include depression. So alcohol is a depressant, and it can make you feel even worse than you did before you had a drink. Alcohol can also worsen some of your depression symptoms, including thoughts of suicide. Obesity. Studies show that alcohol intake can be a risk factor for obesity when you regularly have a lot of it. When we drink, we don't usually compensate by eating less. So even a few drinks can lower your inhibition, prompting you to eat more than otherwise if you were sober. Fatty liver is another long-term effect. It's the liver's job to metabolize. Oh, I forgot to throw obesity in the cocktail. Obesity. So, fatty liver. It's the liver's job to metabolize nutrients from the things we eat and drink, but having too much booze at once overloads the liver, causing fat to build up. The excess fat is stored in the liver cells where it accumulates to form fatty liver disease. All this extra fat can up your risk of harmful inflammatory conditions like alcoholic hepatitis. It can also lead to cirrhosis, where your liver is unable to do its job and actually starts to deteriorate. Another long term would be high blood pressure. High blood pressure, flooding your system with alcohol signals the release of stress hormones that cause your blood vessels to tighten and constrict, temporarily making your blood pressure spike. Over time, this tightening makes your blood vessels stiffen and less elastic, which can cause high blood pressure. Another is cancer. So what's the link? When alcohol is broken down in the body, it's converted to a toxic chemical called acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde can injure both the DNA and the proteins in the body and cause damage to your cells. Alcohol also generates free radicals, harmful compounds that cause cells to oxidize. That can cause healthy cells to grow out of control and become cancerous. So, alcohol is the most okay drug in our culture, but it also kills the most amount of people every year, more than all the drugs combined. So yeah, let's talk about harm reduction. Well, let's pour this into our fizzy cocktail. There we go. All right, so alcohol harm reduction respects every person as a unique individual and supports each individual in the goal which they have chosen for themselves. It neither promotes nor condemns drinking. Alcohol harm reduction supports goals of safer drinking, reduced drinking, or abstinence from alcohol or other substances. There are many different treatment methods. So there are wet shelters, where you're monitored and the amount that you intake for the day. Rehabilitation centers like long-term care facilities where everything's laid out, you've got a routine, and usually or sometimes abstinence is involved. Day centers, you drop in for the day and check in with some supports, and support groups such as Alcoholic Anonymous. So some tips or some harm reduction tips that I would like to give you is always drink in a safe environment. No more than 2 standard drinks of alcohol in a 3-hour window. Eat before or while drinking, and alternate with non-alcoholic drinks such as water. Okay, so this is my presentation today on why alcohol is the most acceptable drug. It really goes back to the history of it, and I don't know why I was surprised to learn about that, because pretty much everything in our society is based on, oppression and racism, and so anyway, thank you for tuning in, Julie, and cheers to school being over. Thank you. Bye.